Coming up on today's show, I want to continue our conversation from yesterday following the Raheem Morris hire and just break down whether or not this was a good decision for Atlanta. Now that we've all had a night to sleep on it, it's not so raw, not so knee jerky. So we'll continue that conversation. And then we got an ESPN report that outlines why the Falcons ultimately passed on what appeared to be their number one candidate from day one of this search, Bill Belichick. And finally, could we see Baker go to Atlanta now that Raheem Morris, who coached Baker in LA, is the head coach of the Falcons? But let's continue the overall reaction to the Raheem Morris hire to begin the video, because I think Morris is a good candidate. I think he's got the capabilities to be a good coach. I've always been a big believer in coaches deserve second chances if the first opportunity was not a complete and utter failure. And I don't think Raheem Morris's interim stint of the head coach of the Falcons was a failure. And sure, the Buccaneers gig didn't go super duper well, but that was so long ago, and that was so early in his coaching career. Now, why am I not over the moon about this hire? Because I would have preferred Bill Belichick or Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson, and I feel like the Raheem Morris hire is a safe hire, but did you fire Arthur Smith to make a safe hire, or did you fire Arthur Smith to make a splash hire, right? And that's what I was sort of under the pretense of believing what the plan was all along. And if Arthur Blank decided to change his mind because Raheem Morris blew him away in an interview, okay, so be it. But to me, I just feel like the Raheem Morris hire is a good hire if you want to get the ball into the middle of the fairway. If you wanted to try and drive the green, though, on a short par 4, I'm not quite sure if this is that hire. And maybe that's not what you want to do. And maybe that's okay, and I can warm up to that idea. But to me, I just feel like the hiring of Raheem Morris is a little on the safe side, like I said, when I feel like there were some bigger fish out there. And you had Belichick. If you don't like Belichick, okay. I understand that the last couple of years in New England don't really leave him all that shiny right now. But Mike Vrabel is an excellent coach, in my opinion. I think Ben Johnson's going to make an excellent head coach. And when you've got second interviews line up with Ben Johnson, and you just conducted one interview with Mike Vrabel, I feel like the hiring in the middle of the week before getting those second interviews with the coaches in the AFC and NFC championship games, it just seems a little bit rushed to me, right? So I am excited to see what Raheem Morris can bring to Atlanta because, like I said, I do think he's capable of being a very good coach. I just feel like his ceiling, and ultimately, we won't know if this is a good hire for a long time. That's kind of the funny thing about head coaching hires is a fan base, no matter if the Falcons or any other team that makes a head coaching hire, not everyone's going to be in agreement. And there's nothing we can really do to change our minds until we get some games in the books. And that's not going to be for months. So we can split hairs, we can bicker, we can argue, we can fight over this hire for the next couple of months. But ultimately, no one's going to be able to prove themselves right or wrong until at least the first season is done. And even then, that's probably too early. Now, a very important element for Raheem Morris being successful as a head coach for a second and a half time, I think we can call it, as interim, kind of a full time as a head coach, I don't think so, is the staff he builds, right? And Rams quarterback's pass game coordinator, Zach Robinson, will be a prime candidate to become the Falcons head coach, Raheem Morris, according to Adam Schefter. So we're already going to see some rumors and some buzz about who Raheem Morris could bring to Atlanta. Les Snead, the Rams GM, said glowing things about Raheem Morris at the end of the year press conference in LA. He said he can get anyone he wants, and everyone's going to be tampering just to come play for Raheem Morris. So he's a very well-liked and respected guy, and you're going to see people on Twitter be like, Raheem Morris only went, when I think the record's 21-38 or something like that as a head coach. I think there's more to a head coach than just win and loss. I think there is something to the staff that you can bring in. And if Raheem Morris can bring in an excellent staff, I'll definitely warm up to this idea. But I feel like the Falcons left a little bit of meat left on the bone with this hire. And that's why I'm just not super psyched up about it, because I just think they could have done better. But I do think Morris is a good candidate. I do think this is a good hire. I don't know if it's a great hire, though, right? And ultimately, you should always strive for excellence, for greatness. And I'm not quite fully in the boat of Raheem Morris is a home run hire. So let me know. Type Y for yes, type N for no if you think Raheem Morris was a good hire for the Falcons. Now, let's close the book on Bill Belichick. He has been kind of the heart and soul of this channel for the last 2 weeks. I'm not going to miss trying to find pictures of Belichick smiling to put on thumbnails because there are very few, and we found one today. But why was Bill Belichick passed on? There were so many reports early on. The day that Belichick and the Patriots parted ways, the first thing out of Adam Schefter's mouth after Belichick and New England have moved on was expect the Falcons to be in on Belichick. And usually the blue check marks don't miss when they are when they're early to the scene of what to come next. Josina Anderson, Schefter, everyone said Belichick to Atlanta. But Dan Graziano, in a ESPN article today, offered this explanation. Multiple sources have said for weeks that blank went into this process wanting Belichick, and I think the league and the industry expected that to work out. But there were hurdles that couldn't be cleared. The organizational structure in Atlanta involves blank and CEO Rich McKay, and a lot of discussions with Belichick centered on the idea of what McKay's role would be if Belichick came to coach the team, and how much power and control the various parties would have in the end. So when I saw the Falcons hired Raheem Morris, I kind of thought, ultimately, I guess Rich McKay did not want to budge on his role in this Falcons front office, and Arthur Blank didn't want to change it, and Belichick did, so that's why they went a different route. But that's not the case, actually, because Adam Schefter indicates another change in Atlanta. General Manager Terry Fontenot and head coach Raheem Morris now will report to Falcons owner Arthur Blank, not CEO Rich McKay as it was. So now I'm kind of left in a spot of confusion. If the hurdle for Belichick to Atlanta was he didn't want to report to Rich McKay because the two did not always see eye to eye back when McKay or still is the chairman of the Rules Committee, but if Rich McKay is no longer the guy that Raheem Morris or any head coach is reporting to, then what was the problem? What was the hurdle? I would really love to know the answer to that question. Was it Terry Fontenot? I find it hard to believe that really was the final obstacle, because it clearly wasn't Rich McKay, because they're moving him out, and hey, that's actually a win in its own right. Like, when we talk about Belichick not coming and Raheem Morris coming, something that's getting lost in the mix is Rich McKay is no longer a part of the Falcons' decision-making brass. And I'm sorry for all the Atlanta United fans, but it looks like he's taking a larger role with the soccer team. So that's going to be a problem for another Atlanta sports team. But Jeremy Fowler, just 48 hours ago, wrote this. And in talking to someone close to him, I don't get the sense he's trying to bulldoze a front office and make it his own. Belichick is capable of working with new people, but as was told to me, he needs certain familiar figures to make the Belichick way tick. That is where figures such as Josh McDaniels, Joe Judge, and Scott Pioli enter the fray. Also a factor in it all, the Falcons value GM Terry Fontenot. So if ultimately Raheem Morris does not work out as the Falcons head coach, not saying it's going to be a 2-3 win disaster, but if it's, somewhat similar to Arthur Smith, maybe between 7 to 9, maybe a 10-win season, but hey, 4 or 5 years down the road, no playoff wins, and Atlanta decides to embark on another head coaching search, remember this moment. Remember this moment, because there is clearly something more to the story that's not being shared with Falcons fans, which is if Rich McKay is no longer the person that the head coach has to report to, and if that was the issue for getting Belichick to Atlanta, then what really transpired? What was the extra element that Belichick wanted that the Falcons were not going to greenlight? Because I don't think it's Rich McKay. They're moving on from Rich McKay as the man at the top of the food chain for the Atlanta Falcons. Now that belongs to Arthur Blank. So what else was it? Did Bill Belichick want Terry Fontenot out? Jeremy Fowler just said that's not the case. Now, maybe Fowler got it wrong. These guys aren't the gospel. But something's going on here. And I don't know if we'll ever get a clear answer. But I would love to know what Belichick really wanted that Arthur Blank would not give. And clearly it wasn't Rich McKay. And I thought that would be the only hurdle. So if that's not it, what is it? We're going to talk about Baker Mayfield potentially coming to Atlanta in just a second here, but we are trying to get a live show every single Thursday for the rest of the offseason at least, but we need to get to 18,300 subscribers. That was the goal my bosses set in my meeting with them on Monday of, hey, if we can get there, which that's not too far away, we'll give you the studio space and we'll give you a producer to get that live show on Thursdays. And we are 36 subs away. So if you have not joined the channel yet, please go ahead and do so. That way we can do more live content like we did yesterday when the news broke. Also, I do want to tell everyone about our sponsor really quickly, which is Fanatics, because they've got an awesome Falcons and t-shirt hat combination on sale. So not only are you just going to get an Atlanta Falcons t-shirt, but you're also going to get a hat as well. Both of them together on sale when you use our link, chatsports.com/ATL combo. That link is in the comments and description of today's video. Now let's talk about Baker Mayfield, because shortly after the Raheem Morris hire, the gears and wheels started moving of, okay, you got your head coach, check that box. Now it's about finding your next franchise quarterback. So who would Raheem Morris have towards the top of his list of desired quarterbacks to work with? And Baker Mayfield comes up as a potential option since he was in LA last season when Raheem Morris was the defensive coordinator. So if the two worked well, you can see how the dots pretty easily connect. But ultimately, I expect Baker Mayfield to return to Tampa Bay. The Buccaneers enter this season kind of in no man's land, right? They come off a Super Bowl win not long ago, some playoff runs and whatnot, but they move on from Tom Brady. They got the most dead cap hits in the NFL, and they just expect to get a cheap quarterback and mail it in, and maybe everyone doesn't lose their jobs. Ultimately, it went way better for the Buccaneers, right? They found Baker, they won 9 games, and I think they're going to hold on to Baker Mayfield. Now, what could a contract look like for Baker as he is a free agent this offseason? I think the Geno Smith contract is a good one to compare it to. I think Baker could get more than Geno, mostly because of the age factor, and Baker's got a much better proven track record than Geno did before his breakout year in Seattle. So what about a 3-year, $90 million contract? $30 million on average. You guarantee half of it. Basically, it's a 2-year, $45 million. So if it doesn't work out, you can kind of get out after 2 seasons. And if that's what the Buccaneers are going to offer, again, this is just my projection. I don't know if I want the Falcons to be the team that ponies up that bill, because it worked in Tampa this past season. I think there's probably a fallacy that runs amongst NFL fans, which is, oh, if Baker did this with one team, then surely he can replicate the same numbers with another team. And I'm not quite sure if I want to bet $90 million on that. So if it's not going to be Baker, because I think he's going to go back to the Buccaneers anyway, both sides sound motivated to get a deal done. Here are some other quarterback options for the Falcons via trade, via free agency, and via the draft. Justin Fields remains my number one target if I'm Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot. I think he's a special quarterback, and a homecoming might be exactly what the doctor ordered for Fields. Russell Wilson, I think, is going to be released by the Broncos. And Wilson's an interesting candidate because his contract language allows him to take a vet minimum deal somewhere. And then ultimately, the Falcons or any team paying him $1.5 million would get an absolute bargain for a starting quarterback. Kirk Cousins, it sounded like if Belichick went to Atlanta, that could be in play. But now that it's Raheem Morris, maybe that's not going to be the case. And if the Vikings decide not to bring him back, I'm sure Atlanta would have interest, but I think Minnesota will. And then finally, Jaden Daniels and Michael Penix. Those are 2 draft options. I don't think Caleb Williams and Drake May are going to be there at 8. I don't think the Falcons are going to jump up to 1 or 2 or 3. And I think Daniels could slide to 8, and I think Penix will definitely be there at 8. But I also think the Falcons could target him in round number 2. Now, who do you think will start week 1 for the Falcons? Don't be afraid to go down to the comment section and reply. And here's why. Because when I asked a question about a week and a half ago, who do you think the next head coach will be? I said, if you get it right, we'll give you a shout out on the show. And we had 3 people in 2 videos where I asked, predict the next head coach. Not who you want, but if you put your money where your mouth is, who would you predict the next head coach to be? I got Hill, Sinhead, I think, Mac Siemens. Let's go with Mac. And then Mr. Tucker. The only three people I could find that predicted Raheem Morris to be the next head coach. So congratulations to you guys. I think you get my job. I had Belichick. So Just let me know when you want to start. Monday, Tuesday, and we'll get you all caught up to speed here. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. We'll let you guys go and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Appreciate everyone for tuning in and making us a part of your day.